My Body, My Choice. Naomi?
So, first of all, I have to give a content warning. There are going to be a little bit of discussion about things that people may not appreciate and may give us some pushback on. But these are things that, as a 25-year, two-time cancer survivor, I have learned and that I feel like need to be discussed. Um, and so, just a heads up on that. Um, the the um, the reason that we're discussing this is that a couple of weeks ago I had a long conversation with someone who was given a cancer diagnosis and told that they had a aggressive cancer that I believe it was stage 4, and so the person decided to go with what was suggested, the chemo and the radiation. And after the second round, after the second round and starting to lose hair already and just not feeling good, the person decided to go with what they felt Yahweh actually wanted them to do initially, and decided to decline the rest of the treatments. The hospital did call and try to talk this person into coming back. And when this person stood their ground, then the hospital called the police to do a wellness check on this person. And that was done over the phone. And this person stood their ground again and had a nice little chat with the police officer and made a comment to the police officer, hey, get this straight. You're calling me, a grown person who is very capable of making their own decision, you're calling me to try and convince me to do something that goes against my better judgment and goes against what I feel like Yahweh wants. And this doesn't make sense to me. And the police officer did agree that, yeah, um, it does sound kind of awkward. And so backed away, and for the next few minutes they had a very pleasant conversation. Um, like I say, as a 25-year two-time cancer survivor, I have known of other people. I have come to learn about what's called medical kidnapping. And a lot of people that I talk to are unaware of it or think that it just happens randomly, or not a very big case happens, not a very big amount of people have that happen. But I have a friend who, her 70 something year old father several years ago was actually medically kidnapped, and I don't believe it was cancer diagnosis, so it's not just for cancer. But he was medically kidnapped, and she was his legal guardian, so she had to really fight to get him released. And then, if you're familiar with Ty and Charlene Bollinger and the Truth About Cancer, they introduced us to a young 17-year-old girl named Cassie, that she and her mother had done a lot of research and decided that they did not want to do the chemo and the radiation, but rather they wanted to go with natural therapies. The hospital called a certain 3-letter entity, and the police were called, and Cassie was medically kidnapped and taken and forced to take those treatments. Um, Take the conventional treatments against her wishes and against her mother's wishes. Now, you're saying, well, that was just one case. Well, no. I have learned about a lot more cases, and I have friends whose children have been diagnosed, and they confirm with me that if they choose not to do the conventional therapies of chemo and radiation, then that certain three-letter entity called CPS will call the police. And not only that child, but if there's any siblings involved, will also be taken away and put into foster care. Do you realize that 47 children per day are given a cancer diagnosis? You know, if you've got children in the public school or even the private school, that could be one whole classroom every day is given a cancer diagnosis. That is outrageous. I've also learned from a couple of organizations, and one of them, I heard the mother talk at a conference that I was at. Her son was 13 when he was diagnosed and did not survive the treatments. And so she started her organization called the Scott Carter Foundation. His name was Scott Carter. And so she started his organization, and what she educated me on was that there has not been any research done in about 40 years for cancer, for childhood cancer. And another organization also, I believe it's called Cure Search for Childhood Cancer. They also educated me on this very same thing, and they're the ones that informed me that 47 children per day are diagnosed. Now, you know, a lot of times we think that my body, my choice means just an unwanted pregnancy that is interrupting a lifestyle or something along that line. No, these families have informed me that not only has no research been done in about 40 years for childhood cancer, but also there is no dosage, no childhood dosage. The children endure an adult dosage of both the chemo and the radiation. And I have known too many people that have gone through those therapies. And I know that when I was first diagnosed, I interviewed with one of those people who had already gone through it and said it is extremely painful. I've also heard a testimonial of somebody who's had tongue cancer 3 times and had a third of her tongue cut off. And in order to do the treatments, they bolt her head to the table so that she doesn't move. Now think about it. If I were to do that to somebody, to either Tim or to Rick or anyone else, where would I be for the rest of my life? But yeah, these guys are allowed to do that kind of thing, and that reminds me of what's gone on in a lot of prison camps and a lot of war camps and stuff like that. To me, it's the very same thing. But like I say, we think that my body, my choice applies only to an unwanted pregnancy that they want to get rid of. I've also learned about what a brain dead diagnosis means. And most people think that the body is shutting down. You know that we have, what, 3 brains? And the one brain is in our gut, and that is the most important one. This one up here just helps to send messages through the body. Yet this is the one that everybody thinks that brain dead means that they're shutting down. But what that diagnosis actually means is that they're going to harvest. They're going to harvest organs. And you cannot harvest organs if the body is completely dead. It has to be alive. And I just found out about a story that happened in, I think, 2002 of a 22-year-old who was in an ATV accident and was given that diagnosis that he was brain dead. And his cousin said, no, I'm not going to listen to that. And took a sharp knife and ran it up his cousin's foot. And his cousin's foot moved. Well, he was told that that was just reflexes. And he said, well, I'm going to try it again, and did it again. And the cousin who'd been told he was brain dead reached up and almost punched him in the face. I also have a dear, dear friend whose daughter was severely injured by being hit in the head with a blunt object, and was declared brain dead. And my friend, she's the one that educated me on what being brain dead really means. And she learned that during her daughter's experience, and she had to really stand her ground and really work hard to be able to pull her daughter out of that, and to be allowed to do that as well. And she also fed her daughter what the brain needed in order to survive and to get what the brain needed. And Tim and I met the daughter, last year, and she is very much alive and has a very active 5-year-old son now.
Hello, Levitical Kingdom Privateers. On September the 12th and 13th, we are hosting the first annual Holy Nation of the Ecclesia Conference. The theme is Threshold Covenant, with great worship brought to us by the Woodcock Singers, a great MC known as Plain Flyer 21, speakers like Dr. Mike Spalding, Jim Odell, Randy Conway, C2K Rick, and our keynote speaker, the world-renowned Vicki Joy Anderson. And don't miss a very special and world-altering Friday night event that will equip you for what is coming. Admission is free for our naturalized families and very affordable for our guests. Head over to c2kreport.com and scroll down on the homepage to find our link to purchase tickets for your friends and family. And remember, it's all about the blood.
So anyway, these are the things that I wanted to talk about. Oh, and Tim has been doing some research, and I wanted him to share a little bit on what he's found. And there is a website. There's been several books that are on Amazon that have been written on this very subject. And some of them are written by lawyers who are involved in helping the families that are dealing with medical kidnapping. So go ahead and find.
I did a quick search on the internet for medical kidnapping, and I came across this definition and a couple stories. Medical kidnapping refers to situations where a hospital or medical facility detains a child against their parents' wishes, often leading to legal battles and emotional distress. Here are some notable stories. A 13-year-old with cancer in Oregon found that her parents' right to control her medical care had limits, as the parent took her out of medical care against medical advice. An 18-year-old girl, Alyssa Gilderhus, was held at the Mayo Clinic, which isolated her from her family, claiming she could make her own medical decisions. Her family moved her to another hospital that disagreed with the Mayo's treatment. The case of Jessica Pill-Itter, who was kept at Boston's Children's Hospital for 16 months, despite her parents' objections, The hospital re-diagnosed her with a psychological condition, separating her from her family. In the Take Care of Maya case, Maya Kowalski, age 10, was rushed to All Children's Hospital of St. Petersburg, Florida, for a flare-up of complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. The doctors were questioned the treatment. The doctors there questioned the treatment she had been receiving, leading to an abusive investigation and tragic outcome. A family in North Carolina faced a situation where the state stepped in to take over child custody when doctors and parents disagreed over the medical care the child should receive. A mother, Hillary, shared her story of being medically kidnapped. Now, this is a mother, not a child, where her son was subjected to unnecessary medical treatment. It was a son. Unnecessary medical treatments, and the family had to fight to get him back. And then finally, Evelyn and Samuel, loving parents, regained custody of their daughter, Leela, from an abusive foster home, only to face another challenge when a hospital refused to release Leela, citing medical concerns. This stuff is happening all over the place. This stuff is heinous. It's really bad. And so it's too common and too often. So how do we prepare to get this taken care of?
Well, let me just say something first. If you're familiar with Ty and Charlene Bollinger with the Truth About Cancer series, like I mentioned before, they introduced us to Cassie, the 17-year-old, but they also interviewed other parents at the time whose children were medically kidnapped and were going through the chemo and the radiation. So there are way too many stories. We were amazed when Tim did the internet search. We were amazed at all the stories that come up. So it's not just an isolated amount. Go ahead.
I handed it over to you.
Oh, okay. And what we have learned over the last couple of years, and we're going to let Rick Hidalgo speak to that, is how our birth certificate plays into this whole situation. And Rick is with C2K, Clash of Two Kingdoms, and he's also got his own channel called Privateers Volley. And you can find those on YouTube and on Rumble. I'm a faithful follower. So anyways, I hand it over to you, Rick.
Wow. So you presented a lot of stuff here already, and there are layers to this.
Yes.
Give me just a moment to kind of build those layers so people can begin to understand, because you said a lot of stuff there. You talked about my body, my choice. You talked about medical kidnapping. You talked about, in fact, Tim, you even defined what medical kidnapping is. You talked about being brain dead. And all of those things have a lot to do with where I want to take you, because I don't know if people really understand this, but when you say medical kidnapping means against the parent's will or against the parent's choices or wishes, when you register a child into this system, you actually are no longer the parents. The state becomes the parents, and the mode in which parents argue in the state is through the courts, where you have attorney A and attorney B going back and forth. I like to call them the Lollipop Guild, but that's just me. But and this is one of those things where, yeah, maybe some people are just going to turn it off right away and say, oh, you're talking about this stuff. I've heard of this before. those state nationals talk about it, or these guys talk about it, or those guys talk about it. But I want you to look at your birth certificate, and I want you to ask yourself this question: why did they put your name in all capital letters? Did your parents um, prioritize the name by putting it in capital letters when they named you? You know, in the hospital, they're given a card to write your name on. Did your parents write your name in all capital letters? More than likely not, because we don't write like that. Okay, first of all. Second of all, look at your birth certificate very closely. You're going to see that there's two dates, not just the date that you were born, but also the date that it was registered. And you're going to notice it's 8 or more days apart. Now, why would that be? Why do you have two different dates on your birth certificate? Isn't it just supposed to be a measure of citizenship to say that, so and so was born on this day? Why go through this entire registration process? What effect could that possibly have? Well, the fact is, it does have an effect. It effectively makes the child a ward of the state, because in a sense, you're kind of saying, here, state, govern this child. I don't have a governance to govern this child by, so I want you to govern it by your governance. So not only is the birth certificate an issue, and the birth registration an issue, but beyond that, it's an issue that we've actually never organized ourselves in how we choose to govern our family. Ultimately, there's a choice there, and there's a group of people that exist on this earth who are beginning to govern themselves according to the scriptures, and those people, have created that choice. They've made it valid to be able to govern yourselves in accordance with the scriptures, rather than whatever the group of baboons in Washington, or Congress, I guess they call themselves, decides to do today. So there's a lot there, but when you say my body, my choice, and you start to tell all the stories that you're telling, it really isn't your choice until you take that choice back. And unfortunately, the only way to begin that process of taking that choice back is through this process called authentication, where you take back administration over that entity that you created when you registered the birth. So, and that begins the process. That is by no means the entirety of the process, but it begins the process of learning how to self-govern yourself, so that this system, when it's compelled to do medical kidnapping, or whatever you want to call it, you can say no, and your no would be valid, and actually have standing. So that's where that's at, and it's terrible that that kind of thing is happening, but the person who's responsible is the one who signed. And if you look on your birth certificate, that's usually the mother who signs it as an informant. And by the way, you notice that they even make the mother sign in their maiden name as if they're not even married. So yeah, there's a lot going on there. But at the end of the day, there is a process to begin to be able to take control of that issue. And we encourage everybody to get involved in that. And of course, we have groups that are teaching and studying that.
That is an interesting process in itself. We actually went through that process, and we have found out it answers a lot of issues in regards to how Babylon looks at us. So I'm going to hand it back to Naomi. Is there anything you want to go forward on?
Well, there's, like Rick said, there's multiple layers, but there are people available to help, and it's not a magic pill. One of the layers is that you have to be willing to take responsibility, and I know nowadays people just want to hand it over to somebody else. But this group that Rick spoke about, we're all about taking on responsibility for ourselves. And there are layers to that. But there are people to help, and there are discussion groups on a regular basis that help out as well. It's not you're on your own, it's not you're left by yourself to figure it out. There are discussion groups of people like us and like Rick who have gone through it. And you know, Rick has what, 5 children?
Yes, Rick, is that right?
I have 6.
No.
6. Okay. And so he knows the process very well. And we've got others that have like 7 children, and they know the process very well as also. And so it's not a scary thing. You know, it's actually a very freeing thing.
And Naomi, if I might just add something. Look, I had a child that when she was born, she wasn't born in a hospital, and we didn't get a birth certificate. And I can tell you that I've had 3 incidents in my life with my children where CPS was called, and I had to deal with them, and I was always able to overcome it, especially with that child. And I mean, there were some pretty serious things. But the reason I was able to overcome it is because they had no compelling interest over her, because there was no birth registration. There was no giving over of administration. So it is a layered thing, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot to learn, but it's manageable and it's not hard to do.
Right, right. So this is just an introduction, and we will put in the video, and we will put underneath the video, whatever, contact places if you're interested in checking out the process. Rick hosts a regular introductory class, and we'll put how you can get involved with that introductory class just to figure out whether or not this is right for you. So we will include that information, and if you want to go further, we'll all 3 of us will help you figure out how to do that as well, to go further.
Well, what I want to do, Rick, is if you can explain how to go ahead and go through the process of them contacting you if they're interested, what resources, and so instead of us closing out, we'll give it over to you. Where do people, if they're interested in finding out this process, how do we begin?
That's true.
Yeah, it's actually pretty simple. I'm one of the hosts of the C2K report, so it's C2K report at outlook.com. C2K report at outlook.com. You just message me and say, hey, I'd like to attend the free class. And I will put you in the next series of free classes. We go 4 consecutive Monday nights. And they're, at the longest, they're 2 hours. At the shortest, they're an hour. Because there's questions and answers. We answer every question until everybody's exhausted, every single week. And what we'll do is we'll take you through a process of showing you what the system is. We call it Babylon, but what the system is. We then take you through and show you how contracts are everything. Everything in this system is a contract. And interest in that contract is what is being fought over, is the interest over that contract. And then in the 4th session, we show you how to come out of this system. And if you're familiar with Scripture, we have an indenture in Revelation that says, come out of her, my people, that you may avoid her plagues. Well, she's got a few plagues, doesn't she?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a few, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she, so we teach you how to come out of her, and there's a very constructive system as to how to do that. it's not long and drawn out, but it does last for the rest of your life because you're constantly needing to self govern yourself. So yeah, so that's kind of a overview.
Do you want to mention anything about September?
Well, we have a conference coming up in September, September the 12th and 13th in Ohio. I'm trying to remember the name of the the city. It's outside of Columbus. Anyhow, right outside of Columbus, there's a little town, and the uh, the
Plain
conference.
City? Is it Plain
Plain
City?
City. There you go.
Yeah.
Yes, Plain City, Ohio, and you can find out more through that same email address, c2kreportadoutlook.com. I can tell you more about the conference, and there's going to be new information. We're planning it for not just those of us who have been part of this for a while, us old folks, uh, but we're also planning it for newbies. Those of you that have never been through the process or don't haven't heard any of this before. There's going to be stuff there for you too. So yeah, you're invited. It's cheap too. I mean, who's ever heard of a big national conference for $30? And if you want to bring your whole family, it's just $50. Doesn't matter if you have a family of 3 or a family of 20. It doesn't matter. You just $50 for the whole family. So it's cheap, and it's a great family environment. People like Tim and Naomi and others like them, like minded, will be there, and it's gonna be a great time. So come on out.
Sounds good.
I have a question. Um, when you say per family, is that just parents and children, or does that include grandparents, aunts and uncles? Oh, there we go.
Um, well, I haven't thought about aunts and uncles. I was mostly thinking about direct,
Family. Family
direct family. But
Immediate,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. I think grandparents.
Okay.
That's fine. Yeah, sure. But I hadn't thought about cousins and third cousins 5 times removed. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Yes, we really appreciate you, Rick, and appreciate you joining us for this podcast. And we appreciate your wisdom and all that you do for everybody that's a part of the ecclesia.
Keep up the great work, Rick.
Thank you for having me.